In today's video, I'll be demonstrating the new demographic map project template available in Simple GIS Client. This template will guide users to create a new map displaying various demographic data by common geographic boundaries such as state boundaries, county boundaries, congressional districts, or MSA areas. The template uses data from the US Census Bureau's American Community Survey API service. Users can select to use the 5-year ACS estimates or the 1-year ACS estimates. As such, users will need an API key from the US Census Bureau. These keys are freely available and can be easily requested from the US Census Bureau. And in fact, the project template actually includes a link that will bring you to the request page of the US Census Bureau where the user can request an API key that would then be emailed to the user. The user can then copy and paste this key in a Simple GIS Client where it will be saved for future use. To begin, from the New Project window of the main Simple GIS Client application, the user would select the demographic map project template by simply double-clicking on its tile as illustrated here. At this point, a new project will be created and a dialog will appear that will begin to guide the user through the process of generating their map. The first step is to enter a name for your new project. This will create a project using this name, and in fact, it will create a folder using this same name under the root folder indicated here for the default project location. Now, users can change this default project location by simply clicking on this link and choosing a different folder. At this point, if Simple GIS has not detected a valid US Census key, you'll get this message here indicating that it did not find a key. There's also a link here that says Request US Census Key that if you click on it, it will actually bring you to the page on the US Census Bureau's website where you can enter your information and request a free key. Once you have requested the key will be emailed to the email address entered. Once you have received that key, you can come here to this edit box, right-click and select Paste to paste your key. At this point, you would select the extent for your new map. You can choose a national map that will cover the entire continental US, including Alaska and Hawaii, or you can select a regional map if you're only interested in a smaller region like a single state or multiple states, or different metro, micro, metropolitan areas. Once you select your map extent, then you would need to specify the demographic boundaries that you want to use for your map. Again, you can select state, counties, congressional districts, MSA areas, either metro or micro, or even metro divisions. In this case, I could choose counties. And then you could click Next. If you already had a file with the same name as the project that you entered here for your project name, you'll get a prompt asking whether you want to overwrite your existing project file. In this case, I'm going to select yes. The next step is to select a base map for your map. So this will be the underlying map that your demographic data will be displayed on top of. So you just can select from any of these available base maps. In this case, I'm going to select the OpenStreetMap as my base map. It would then add that into your map view. And next, you will be brought to your demographic queries page. At this point, you can select from some of these standard queries here that are listed. So we have population queries, we have income queries, housing statistics, education, etc. Or if you'd like, you could create your own query by clicking on the Define New Query, selecting from the available categories and the available tables. All of these are available tables and categories within the American Community Survey. And then you would select the fields that you'd want to include in your query. I'm going to select the median household income. That's one of the standard queries. And at this point, I'm going to select next. And then finally on this page, you would select the field that contains the demographic data that's of interest. You can enter in a title for your map here. This is what would appear in the legend. And then for the map options, you can select the raw demographic values just as a proportional gradient. Or you can compare demographic changes over time. Or you can even project demographic values using a linear regression, using historical data. Now, it is important to understand when you're comparing data about time period comparisons in the ACS data. If you're using the 5-year data set, even though the US Census Bureau does strongly discourage comparing time period in overlapping 5-year data sets, you can still get some generalized trend information using this. And in fact, if you wanted to click this link, this will bring you some important information to consider when you're doing time period comparisons, especially when using the 5-year data set. And the reason is the 5-year data set is an average over a 5-year period. And so if you're using overlapping periods, you're seeing a generalized value here. And so you may not be seeing the full extent of changes in one year over the next. So it's just something to keep in mind to make sure you're understanding what you're actually comparing. And so you can click this link to get some information regarding that. Again, you can do raw demographic values if you'd like. And so I can also select the data set that I'd want to use, a 1-year data set or a 5-year data set. Now, for the 1-year data set, please be aware, as this says, the 1-year data set will not contain data for any geographic boundaries that have populations values less than 65,000. So in this case, we had selected our boundaries as counties, and there are many counties, especially in rural areas, that will not meet this population threshold, so there would not be data available in the 1-year estimate. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. So depending upon the geographic boundaries that you're selecting, the 1-year data set may not be a good data to use. You may need to use a 5-year data set just because there may not be available data in the 1 year. Next, you can select your classification type. Again, if you're just wanting to do a sequential proportional using a color gradient, or you could do a diverging legend if you wanted to see kind of how whatever demographic data you have diverges over some type of central median value. You could do that as well. In this case, I'm going to leave it to sequential. How many classifications you want to include, you can increase this or decrease this, which just indicates the number of gradients you see here. You notice as you increase or decrease this value, how your color gradient, the number of gradients changes. And then also an opacity value. So if you wanted your layer to be semi-transparent, you could set this value to some value less than 100. If you wanted to be able to see any of the underlying base map data through your demographic data, you could do that as well. And then once you're complete, you just simply click the Generate Map. This will actually begin the process of querying the US Census Bureau based upon the extent and boundaries you've selected. And then once it's complete, you'll see this dialog box disappear, and then you'll see your map here appear. Now this is the basically the published map document. So again, this kind of shows you, in this case, we had selected the U.S. as our extent. So we see the continental U.S. here. And then we have some insets here for Alaska and Hawaii. And again, we selected counties as the boundaries. So that's, it's don't get it's pretty cluttered in this particular map, but you can kind of see some hot spots here of some increasing values. Again, what we selected was median household income. So the darker areas indicate areas that have a higher median household income, while the lighter areas indicate obviously areas that have a lower median household income. And if you look at the bottom of your application window, you see here that we're on the national map, which is our published map document. But if you want to look at the interactive map, there's a second tab here called Demographic Map View, which is what this published map is based on. If I click on that tab, that brings me here to the interactive map. And at this point, I can zoom and pan and actually query values and do other types of analysis that I can't do from the published map. So in this case, I can zoom in, pan. I can actually use the identified data, click on some of these counties to get the raw data at this point. So for this particular county, I see this is Ellis County in Texas. Median household income in 2024 was $99,595, and the margin of error was plus or minus 3,164. And so you can actually view the raw data from this simply by clicking on any county using the View Feature Data tool. And so that's all it takes to generate a map of demographic data. And again, there's a lot of different options. There's really, thousands of possibilities of different data you can map, different geographic boundaries. And hopefully this gives you an idea how easily you can generate these maps in Simple GIS Client. Just encourage you to visit our website for any other information. That website is simplegissoftware.com. You can always reach out to us through our email address, which is it's contact us at simplegissoftware.com.